In a world where pain and loneliness often go unseen, animals remind us of something powerful, that love, loyalty, and courage can come from the most unexpected places. The Arizona desert stretched out like a copper sea, its waves of sand and stone baking under the relentless summer sun. The thermometer had been climbing past 1110 degrees for weeks now, and the drought, already in its third year, had turned the normally challenging desert environment into something truly merciless. It was in this punishing landscape that Maya Rodriguez found herself on patrol. At 26, she was one of the youngest rangers at Saguaro National Park, but what she lacked in experience, she made up for with an innate understanding of the desert and its inhabitants. The daughter of a wildlife veterinarian and a botanist, Maya had grown up with one foot in the wild world and one in the scientific one. Today's patrol was taking her deep into the eastern district of the park, a remote area where few tourists ventured. Her supervisor had been reluctant to send her out alone in this heat, but water sources were dwindling fast, and they needed to document which ones had dried up completely. Just a status check, Chief Ranger Bennett had told her that morning, his weathered face creased with concern. Don't try to be a hero out there. The desert doesn't care how tough you are. Maya had nodded, filled her jeep with extra water jugs, and headed out before dawn. Now, with the sun directly overhead, she was grateful for that early start. She pulled her jeep to a stop atop a rocky ridge and stepped out, the heat immediately wrapping around her like a heavy blanket. Through her binoculars, she surveyed the valley below. The landscape was a testament to resilience. Saguaro cacti stood like ancient sentinels, their arms raised as if in defiance of the harsh condition. But even these desert specialists were showing signs of stress, their normally plump bodies slightly shrunken from the extended drought. Maya was about to return to her vehicle when a movement caught her eye. Something large, moving awkwardly across a distant flat. She adjusted her binoculars, focusing intently. "No way," she whispered to herself. It was a wild Mustang, a mare by the looks of it, moving with a pronounced limp. Wild horses weren't common in this part of the desert, though small herds could occasionally be spotted in the borderlands between the park and the adjacent tribal lands. What was unusual was seeing one alone and clearly in distress. Maya quickly got back in her jeep and began navigating the rugged terrain toward the horse. As she got closer, she could see that the situation was worse than she'd initially thought. The Mustang was severely dehydrated, its normally muscular body gaunt, its coat dull. But most concerning was its right hind leg, which appeared to be caught in something. Stopping the jeep about 50 yards away, Maya grabbed her field kit and a canteen of water. She approached slowly, speaking in a low, calm voice. "Easy there, girl. I'm just here to help." The Mustang's reaction was immediate and fierce. Despite its weakened state, it reared up, her eyes wild with fear, letting out a sound that was half whinny, half scream. It tried to bolt but could only manage a few agonizing steps before the restraint on its leg brought it up short. Now Maya could see the problem clearly. The horse's leg was caught in a wire snare, an illegal trap that someone had set, probably for coyotes or javelina. The wire had cut deep into the leg, and infection had clearly set in. Maya retreated to her jeep and grabbed her radio. "Base, this is Ranger Rodriguez." After a moment of static, a voice responded. "Go ahead, Rodriguez. I've got an injured wild Mustang out in Section E7. Female, adult, caught in an illegal snare. Severe dehydration and what looks like a serious infection in the right hind leg." A pause then. "What's your assessment? Can you free it?" Maya looked back at the horse, which was now watching her warily, sides heaving from the brief exertion. "Negative. She's too spooked and in too much pain. I need backup in the mobile vet unit." "Copy that. Dr. Buggy is out on the reservation today. I'll try to reach him, but it could be a few hours." Maya frowned. A few hours might be too long in this heat, with the horse already so compromised. Understood. I'll set up shade and leave water, but I'm going to keep my distance. Don't want to stress her more than necessary. Good call. Be careful out there, Rodriguez. Maya spent the next hour constructing a makeshift shade structure near the horse, using a tarp from her Jeep and some collapsible poles she carried for emergencies. She filled a shallow pan with water and placed it as close to the Mustang as she dared, then retreated to her vehicle. Through her binoculars, she studied the magnificent animal. Despite its current state, the Mustang showed all the hallmarks of the Spanish bloodlines that had first brought horses to these lands centuries ago. A compact, muscular build, a slightly dished face, and a proud carriage that even pain and fear couldn't diminish. Wild Mustangs were living history, descendants of the horses that had escaped or been released by Spanish explorers, Native Americans, and ranchers over hundreds of years. They had adapted to survive in one of America's harshest environments, developing an intelligence and hardiness that put domestic horses to shame. This mare was special even among Mustangs. Her coat was a rich bay with a black mane and tail, but what stood out was a distinctive white blaze that ran from between her eyes down to her muzzle, shaped almost like a lightning bolt. Lightning, Maya murmured to herself. That's what I'll call you. As the afternoon wore on, the temperature continued to climb. Maya checked in with base camp every 30 minutes, but Dr. Bugay was still unavailable. The horse had barely moved, conserving energy, but it had also made no attempt to drink from the water Maya had left. By 3 p.m., Maya made a decision. She couldn't wait any longer. She approached again, this time with a different strategy. Instead of walking directly toward the horse, she circled around, keeping her movements slow and predictable. She brought a small bucket of water with her. I know you're scared, she said softly as she moved, but that leg needs attention and you need water. The Mustang watched her, ears flicking nervously, but didn't try to rear up again. Maya took this as a good sign and continued her careful approach. When she was about 15 feet away, she sat down cross-legged on the ground, making herself smaller and less threatening. She placed the bucket of water in front of her and then did something unexpected. She began to sing. It was a Navajo healing song her grandmother had taught her. A gentle melody with words that spoke of harmony and balance restored. Maya had no illusions about magical healing, but she knew that her voice, soft, steady, and non-threatening, might help calm the frightened animal. For almost 20 minutes, Maya sat and sang, occasionally taking small sips from the water bucket to show the horse it was safe. Eventually, the Mustang's ears, which had been pinned back in fear, slowly moved forward in curiosity. That's it, Maya encouraged. I'm not here to hurt you. With agonizing slowness, the horse shifted its weight and took a tentative step toward Maya and the water, then another. The pain and restraint of the snare made each movement a visible struggle, but thirst was a powerful motivator. Finally, the Mustang stretched its neck out and reached the water bucket. As it drank greedily, Maya remained perfectly still, continuing to hum the healing melody. When the horse finished drinking, it raised its head, water dripping from its muzzle, and looked directly at Maya. Something passed between them in that moment. Not trust yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Maya slowly reached into her pack and pulled out a pair of heavy-duty wire cutters. Now for the hard part, she said softly. The process of cutting the snare was painstaking. Each time Maya moved closer, the horse grew tense, and she would retreat, singing again until the Mustang settled. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The sun began its descent toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the desert floor. Finally, Maya was close enough to see the cruel wire cutting into the horse's leg. The wound was ugly, swollen with infection, but the wire hadn't cut through any tendons. A small mercy. Last step now, Maya whispered. This might hurt, but then you'll be free. With a swift, decisive movement, she cut through the wire. The Mustang flinched but didn't bolt, perhaps too weak, or perhaps Maya hoped, beginning to understand that she was there to help. Maya retreated again, giving the horse space. For several long minutes the Mustang didn't move, as if it couldn't comprehend that the restraint was gone. Then, cautiously, it took a step with its injured leg. Though clearly painful, the relief of being able to move freely was evident. The horse looked at Maya again, and this time she was sure she saw something beyond fear in those large, expressive eyes. The sound of an approaching engine broke the moment. The Mustang's head shot up, and despite its injury it managed a hobbling retreat to the shelter of a large boulder about 50 yards away. Maya stood as Dr. Alan Begay's veterinary truck came into view. Perfect timing, she called out as the truck stopped and Dr. Begay stepped out. In his 50s, with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a traditional bun, the Navajo veterinarian had been treating both domestic and wild animals in this region for over 20 years. "Sorry it took so long," he said, shaking Maya's hand. "Had an emergency with some sheep on the reservation." He looked around. "Where's our patient?" Maya pointed to the boulder where the Mustang was partially hidden. "Wild one, huh?" Dr. Begay observed. "Very. But we've made some progress. I managed to cut the snare, but the leg is badly infected." Dr. Begay nodded, assessing the situation. "We'll need to sedate her to treat that wound properly." "Did you happen to notice if she's part of a herd?" Maya shook her head. "No sign of other horses. I think she's been alone out here for a while." "That's unusual," he commented, opening the back of his truck to prepare his equipment. "Mustangs are herd animals. They don't typically survive long on their own in these conditions." "She's a fighter," Maya said, glancing toward the boulder where she could just make out the shine of the horse's eyes watching them. "I'm calling her Lightning." Dr. Begay smiled. "Let's see if we can save Lightning then." The sedation process was tricky. Even with a long-range tranquilizer dart, they needed to get relatively close to the injured horse. Maya led the approach, speaking softly in a mix of English and Navajo phrases she'd learned from her grandmother. The Mustang was understandably wary of this new human presence, but seemed to take some comfort in Maya's familiar voice. When Dr. Begay finally had a clear shot, the dart found its mark, and within minutes, the baleful sedative took effect. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the desert in deepening shades of purple and gold, they worked quickly to clean and treat the infected wound. Dr. Begay administered antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, and vitamins to combat the dehydration and malnutrition. "She's in rough shape," he said as he wrapped a protective bandage around the leg. "But Mustangs are incredibly resilient. If she can make it through the next 48 hours, she has a good chance." "What happens now?" Maya asked. "We can't just leave her out here." Dr. Begay straightened up, looking thoughtful. "Ordinarily, I'd say we transport her to a rehabilitation facility, but the nearest one that handles wild horses is overcrowded already." He looked at Maya. "There is another option. We've been setting up a temporary recovery corral at the old Parker Ranch on the edge of the park. It's meant for injured wildlife during this drought." "I know the place," Maya nodded. "It has that natural spring that's still running." "Exactly. We could take her there, let her heal, and then release her once the drought breaks." "But," he hesitated, "someone would need to check on her daily, monitor the wound, make sure she's eating and drinking." Maya didn't hesitate. "I'll do it." Dr. Begay smiled knowingly, as if he'd expected nothing less. "I thought you might say that. It's not going to be easy, you know. Wild horses don't tame quickly, if at all." "I don't want to tame her," Maya said, looking at the sedated Mustang. "I just want to help her survive." With the help of 2 additional rangers who arrived with a horse trailer, They carefully loaded the sedated Mustang for transport. The drive to the Parker Ranch was slow and cautious, winding through darkening desert roads. The old ranch house stood silhouetted against the night sky when they arrived, a relic from a bygone era when cattle ranching had briefly flourished in parts of the desert. Now it served as an occasional outpost for park services. Behind it, a sturdy corral had been constructed near the spring-fed pond, one of the few reliable water sources still flowing despite the drought. They gently transferred Lightning to the corral, laying her on a bed of soft hay. Dr. Begay administered a reversal agent for the sedative. "She'll start waking up within 30 minutes, he explained to Maya. "I'd recommend staying out of the corral when that happens. Give her time to adjust to her new surroundings." Maya nodded, though part of her wanted to stay right beside the horse through the night. "I've left additional medications and instructions in the ranch house," Dr. Begay continued. "Come by the clinic tomorrow, and I'll give you a crash course in equine wound care." After everyone else had left, Maya sat on an old wooden bench outside the corral, watching as Lightning began to stir. The Mustang's eyes opened, confusion evident as she took in her new surroundings. She struggled to her feet, unsteady at first, then more confident as she tested her bandaged leg. The corral was spacious, with access to the spring-fed pond and a small shelter for protection from the elements. Still, to a wild creature used to roaming free across vast landscapes, it must have felt like a prison. Lightning paced the perimeter, looking for a way out. When she found none, she let out a frustrated whinny that echoed across the desert night. "I know," Maya said softly, "but it's just for a little while until you're stronger." The Mustang's head turned toward her voice, eyes reflecting the emerging stars above. "I'll be back tomorrow," Maya promised, "and the next day and the next for as long as it takes." What Maya couldn't know as she drove back to her small apartment that night was that "as long as it takes" would turn into one of the most challenging and rewarding experiences of her life. The following morning she arrived at the ranch just as dawn was breaking over the eastern mountains. She approached the corral cautiously, unsure of what reception she would receive from Lightning. The Mustang stood at the far end, watching Maya with wary attention. Her stance was defensive, but Maya noticed she was putting some weight on the injured leg, a positive sign. Following Dr. Begay's instructions, Maya had brought fresh food, alfalfa hay, a special grain mix fortified with nutrients, and some apples as potential treats. She placed these in the feeding area, then filled the water trough from the spring. "Breakfast is served," she said cheerfully, though she maintained her distance. Lightning showed no interest in approaching while Maya was near, so after checking that everything was in order, Maya retreated to the ranch house porch with her binoculars. From there she could observe without causing stress. Once alone, the Mustang cautiously approached the food, sniffing it suspiciously before taking a tentative bite of hay. Within minutes, her hunger overcame her weariness, and she was eating with gusto. Maya smiled. Good girl. This became their daily routine. Maya would arrive early, provide fresh food and water, and retreat to observe. In the evenings, she would return to do the same, always talking softly, always giving Lightning space. Days stretched into a week. The infection in the leg was improving, according to Dr. Begay, who visited twice to check on his patient, but Lightning remained distant, retreating to the far side of the corral whenever humans approached too closely. "She may never fully trust people," Dr. Begay warned Maya during his second visit. "Wild Mustangs, especially adults who've had negative experiences with humans, often maintain their wariness." "I know," Maya said. "I'm not trying to make her into a pet. I just want her to know that not all humans are a threat." The turning point came during the second week, on a blistering hot afternoon when the temperature soared to 115 degrees. Maya had brought a special electrolyte mixture for Lightning's water and was sitting in the sliver of shade beside the corral, reviewing wildlife reports on her tablet. A sudden movement caught her eye. Lightning, who normally kept her distance, was approaching the fence where Maya sat. The Mustang moved with deliberate steps, her eyes fixed on Maya. Maya remained perfectly still, barely breathing. Lightning came within a few feet of the fence and lowered her head, nostrils flaring as she took in Maya's scent. Then, to Maya's astonishment, the horse extended her neck across the fence and gently nudged Maya's shoulder. The touch lasted only a second before Lightning retreated, but it felt momentous. It was the first voluntary contact the wild horse had initiated. "Thank you for trusting me," Maya whispered, fighting back unexpected tears. From that day forward, their relationship evolved. Lightning began greeting Maya when she arrived, coming to the fence for brief moments of contact before moving away. Maya started bringing a brush, and eventually Lightning allowed her to reach through the fence rails to gently groom her neck and shoulder, never for long, but each session lasted a little longer than the previous one. By the end of the third week, Dr. Begay declared that the leg had healed enough to remove the bandage. "She's making remarkable progress," he told Maya, as they watched Lightning trotting around the corral, her movement growing stronger and more fluid each day. "The question now is what happens next?" It was a question Maya had been avoiding. The original plan had been to release Lightning back into the wild once the drought broke, but there was no sign of that happening anytime soon. The temporary rehabilitation corral wasn't meant for long-term housing. "There's a wild horse sanctuary in northern Arizona," Dr. Begay suggested. "They have thousands of acres where Mustangs can roam freely but are still protected." Maya nodded, knowing this was probably the most practical solution, yet feeling a surprising reluctance at the thought of sending Lightning so far away. "Think about it," Dr. Begay said, seeming to sense her hesitation. "There's no rush to decide today." That evening, as Maya sat by the corral watching the sunset paint the desert in fiery hues, Lightning came to stand beside her at the fence. Without the barrier of the bandage, Maya could now see the scar where the snare had cut into the leg, a permanent reminder of human cruelty. Yet despite this, the Mustang had found it in herself to trust again. There was a profound lesson in that, Maya thought. She was so lost in these reflections that she almost missed the distant sound at first, a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the ground rather than the air. Lightning heard it too. Her head shot up, ears pricked forward intently. Maya stood, trying to identify the sound. It wasn't thunder. The sky was clear. Not an aircraft or vehicle either. Then she realized what it was. Just as Lightning let out an excited whinny. Horses. Running horses. Maya grabbed her binoculars and scanned the horizon. There, about a half-mile to the east, a small herd of Mustangs was moving across a flat expanse, kicking up dust in the evening light. "Your family," Maya wondered aloud. Lightning's reaction was unmistakable. She paced the corral excitedly, eyes fixed on the distant herd, calling out with increasingly urgent whinnies. Maya made a split-second decision. She went to the corral gate, hesitated for just a moment, then swung it open. "Go on," she said, stepping back. "If that's where you belong, then go." Lightning paused at the open gate, looking at Maya as if uncertain. "It's okay," Maya assured her. "You're free." The Mustang took a tentative step through the gate, then another. Once clear of the corral, she stopped again, turning to look back at Maya. For a long moment, they gazed at each other, the wild horse and the woman who had helped her heal. Then Lightning tossed her head and took off at a gallop toward the distant herd, her previously injured leg strong and sure beneath her. Maya watched through tear-blurred eyes as the mare's powerful strides carried her across the desert, her dark mane flowing like a banner against the deepening twilight. When Lightning reached the herd, there was a visible commotion. Maya couldn't make out details from this distance, but she could see the horses gathering around the newcomer, a reunion of sorts taking place. "Goodbye, Lightning," Maya whispered, a mixture of joy and sadness washing over her. She had known all along that this was the right outcome, a wild horse returning to freedom, but that didn't make the parting any easier. As darkness fell, Maya reluctantly turned to leave. She had just reached her jeep when a sound made her turn back. Hoof beats, growing closer. To her amazement, Lightning was returning, but she wasn't alone. The entire herd of Mustangs, about 12 in all, was following her across the desert floor toward the ranch. Maya stood perfectly still as Lightning approached, stopping about 20 feet away. Behind her, the other Mustangs gathered mares, foals, and a magnificent black stallion who was clearly the herd leader. They were cautious but not panicked, following Lightning's lead. Understanding dawned on Maya. The drought had pushed the herd to the limits of survival. Water sources they had relied on for generations had dried up, forcing them to venture into unfamiliar territories in search of relief. Lightning nickered softly and pawed the ground, then turned her head toward the spring-fed pond behind the corral. "You're showing them the water," Maya realized aloud. "You're bringing them to safety." It was an extraordinary display of both intelligence and trust. Lightning had not only returned to her herd, but had brought them back to the one place she knew had reliable water, even though it meant returning to a human presence. Maya backed away slowly, giving the wild horses space. The black stallion approached the pond first, sniffing the water cautiously before taking a drink. One by one, the rest of the herd followed, their thirst overcoming their wariness. Lightning was the last to drink. She kept her eyes on Maya the entire time, as if making sure it was truly okay for her family to be there. That night, Maya slept in the old ranch house instead of returning to her apartment. She wanted to be nearby in case the herd decided to move on. But when dawn broke, they were still there, grazing on the sparse vegetation around the pond. Maya called Chief Ranger Bennett and Dr. Begay, explaining the remarkable development. By mid-morning, they had arrived to see for themselves. "I've never seen anything like it," Bennett admitted as they observed the Mustangs from a distance. Wild horses leading their herd to humans for help. "It goes against everything we know about their behavior." "Not to humans," Dr. Begay corrected. "To Maya, and to water. There's a difference." Maya couldn't take her eyes off Lightning, who was now grooming a small foal that must have been born during the drought, judging by its size. "What do we do now? They can't stay here permanently, but they clearly need help until the drought ends." Chief Bennett scratched his chin thoughtfully. "The old Parker Ranch extends for nearly 1,000 acres, most of it now part of the park. There's good grazing land beyond the hills to the north, and with the spring feeding the pond, there's enough water. Are you suggesting we turn this into a Mustang sanctuary?" Maya asked, hope rising in her chest. "A temporary one, at least." Bennett nodded. "We've been talking about creating a protected area for the wild herds anyway. This drought has only emphasized the need." He looked at Maya. "It would need a dedicated ranger to oversee it, of course." The implication was clear, and Maya felt a surge of emotion. "I'd be honored." "It won't be easy," Dr. Begay cautioned. "These horses are wild and should remain so. The goal would be minimal intervention, just enough to help them through the drought." "I understand," Maya assured him. "I don't want to change who they are. I just want to give them a fighting chance." As the three of them made plans, Lightning broke away from the herd and trotted toward them, stopping at a respectful distance. The black stallion raised his head, alert but not interfering, seemingly giving his permission for this unusual interaction. Lightning's coat gleamed in the morning sunlight, healthier and more vibrant than when Maya had first found her trapped and suffering. The scar on her leg would always remain, but it hadn't diminished her strength or spirit. Maya stepped forward, moving slowly until she stood just a few feet from the wild mare. Lightning lowered her head and gently blew air through her nostrils, a horse's way of greeting. "Thank you for trusting me," Maya said softly, echoing the words she had spoken weeks earlier. This time she extended her hand, palm up, offering but not demanding contact. Lightning stretched her neck forward, and for the briefest moment her soft muzzle touched Maya's palm, a connection between two worlds that were different yet fundamentally linked by the same basic needs: safety, sustenance, and the freedom to thrive. The touch lasted only seconds, but in it was a promise, not of domestication or ownership, but of respect and coexistence, a recognition that sometimes survival depended on building bridges rather than walls. As Lightning turned and trotted back to her herd, Maya knew that she had been given a rare gift, the trust of a wild creature, who had every reason to fear humans but had chosen to see beyond that fear. In the months that followed, word of the Parker Ranch Mustang sanctuary spread. What had begun as an emergency measure during the drought evolved into a permanent protected area for wild horses. With Maya as its primary guardian, she never tried to tame Lightning or any of the other Mustangs, respecting their wild nature while providing just enough support to help them thrive. When the drought finally broke later that year, with monsoon rains transforming the desert into a brief oasis of green, many of the horses, including Lightning's herd, ventured beyond the sanctuary boundaries to explore their expanded territory, but they always returned to the spring and to the woman who had earned their trust in the harshest of times. And sometimes, in the quiet of dawn, Maya would find Lightning waiting by the old ranch house, as if inviting her to share in the freedom of a morning run across the desert. They both called home, a silent reminder that the most profound connections often come from simply recognizing the dignity and worth of another living being, and offering help with no expectation of return. This story is more than just about survival. It's about the unbreakable bond between humans and animals, and how sometimes they don't just share our lives, they save them.